Hello everybody, my name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today we're going to be going back into the Southern Baptist Convention. We're going to be talking about FBC Orlando. This is a church I've talked about before on this channel, but this time we're not going to be talking about their branch Covidianism or their wokeness. We're going to be talking about how this church is effectively pro-homosexuality and how they brag about having homosexuals and transvestites and cohabitors, or another word for that is fornicators, basically in good standing as members of their church. So these comments came out of FBC Orlando. That is the Church of David Youth, and he's a very prominent megachurch pastor in the Southern Baptist Convention. Big Eva likes David Youth. And I did an entire video exposing how his church has basically collapsed numbers-wise because of their decision to lock down. That decision to lock down has had an incredible amount of impact on their membership in terms of their live streaming services and stuff like that. I went through and showed you the live streams and the attendance of each live stream, and it showed a pretty spot on picture that this church is a shadow of itself. It's a shadow of itself. So we're going to be playing a clip from FBC Orlando. This is from the most recent Sunday in a service titled "We Are First Orlando." This is the sermon, and it's not by David Youth. It's by Pastor Danny de Armas. I guess he's like, one of the pastors there, but not David Youth. So I don't want everything I'm saying to characterize David Youth, but this is Pastor Danny Armas characterizing his own church, and we gotta, to some degree, accept the fact that this is probably a pretty accurate characterization of this church. I don't think he would lie at all, presumably 3 services, saying the exact same thing. I don't think he would lie about the nature of the church to this church. So with that said, I think this is a pretty representative sample. However, just because these comments are in and of themselves pro-sexual immorality, that is not all that's going on here. I do think there is a larger, and by larger I mean more fundamentally basic to the function of a church issue going on here. And that's what I'm going to talk about, but we're going to play the clip first.
This is how I talk about you when you're not around. We are First Orlando. We are a diverse, welcoming, multicultural gathering of people. We have white, black, brown, yellow, Hispanic, Haitian, island, African, Brazilian, Middle Eastern, Indian, and every other blend and mix of people you can imagine. And yes,
just a point of order. When I did the whole this church is a ghost megachurch, I was taking a look at photos like this and comparing them to pre-lockdowns. Way different picture. It was way more packed pre-lockdowns. Like, this church is fading and fading fast.
we even have Venezuelan people here who are just like you. He's from Venezuela. Our services are live translated by paid translators into Spanish and Portuguese. We offer listening devices for those wishing to hear in their own language, and we distribute between 100 and 400 devices each service. We gather every week with people who are exploring and asking questions about Jesus, some who are just beginning to walk with Jesus, and we have many who have been following Jesus for decades, and they're growing and leading others to follow Jesus too. We have longtime members of 50-plus years greeting and welcoming new people who are walking in for the very first time. We have those who love traditional music and hymns, and those who know only contemporary music. We have choir lovers and non-music lovers, a pipe organ, and loud electric guitars.
Just another point of order. They do separate services for separate preferences in music.
We have the 99-year-old World War II hero, and the millennial immigrant who doesn't know anything about American history sitting on the same row and listening and learning about Jesus together. We have transgender, LGBTQ, straight, single, married, divorced, and cohabitating people. These same people attend, listen, serve, grow, and give. We have Democrats.
Again, we need to pause right there. They're serving? In what capacity are you letting transvestites serve in your church? Like, being a transvestite is basically an outward expression of I defy God's created order. I defy Genesis 2 in my own life every single day. That's what being a transvestite is. So I don't like that. That's what he's promoting here. And this church allows that to serve without discipline. That's where I'm going to go with this later on.
Republicans, independents, and non-registered people. We have documented and undocumented people. We have politically active and socially responsible people.
Again, this is a church that fosters illegal immigration. That's basically what he just said. And illegal immigrants are invaders and criminals. Let's be real about that. So this is a church that harbors illegal immigrants, or invaders as I call them. So that's wrong.
We have pro-life and pro-choice and pro-war and pro-peace.
He just equated the war-peace debate, which is pretty non-specific, with abortion. And there's no such thing as pro-choice. There's only pro-life and pro-abortion. It's really pro-abortion.
We have Support the Blue and Black Lives Matter, sitting together and serving together. We have Trumpers and never Trumpers. We have Biden supporters and Harris supporters. We have the ultra wealthy and the indigent sitting together, singing together, and serving together. We have the social elite and the social outcast. We have the best dressed and the barely dressed. And in the midst of all of this, we have one of the most beautiful worship experiences you can possibly imagine. Because all of us gather around the good news of Jesus and the one who is changing us and the one who unifies us. And we celebrate how he has set us all free from our bondage to sin and given us eternal life. Jose, we are First Orlando.
So according to him, the active homosexual is saved. According to him, the active transvestite is saved. According to him, the communist is a Christian. According to him, the person who supports abortion, up and through birth, is saved. There's no indication that these are wrong. There's no indication that fornicating is wrong. He's juxtaposing things that are sins with things that aren't sins, and then at the same time, and this is a key distinction, two things that aren't sins but are opposite. Like when Paul juxtaposes male and female and Jew and Gentile, he's doing that same juxtaposition with categories of sin and non-sin, sin and obedience even. So that is incredibly errant. Errant's the word. I don't know how much more is left, but this is and the crowd is cheering. That's something else that's important to note. The small crowd that is there is cheering this.
You're a beautiful people. When God sees you, he says, that's good. It's really, really good.
I think he's going to take too long, but let's just make the point that really needs to be made. First of all, I think if God sees that church, he's going to open up the book of Revelations, go to chapter 2 or chapter 3 on this church. And it's not going to be Philadelphia, if you know what I'm saying. So, with that said, the larger issue at play with this church is a fundamental breakdown in what it means to be a church in the first place. There are certain functions of a church. The church is to fulfill the Great Commission. It is to carry out. It is to evangelize. It's one of the functions of a church. I'm trying to list the ones that I'm trying to get to before the main one I'm going to get at, so I'm just blanking here. But evangelizing is one of the functions of the church. The ordinances, that's what I'm forgetting. The ordinances are a function of the church. Baptism, Lord's Supper, that is a function of the church. Discipline is a function of the church. So this is a church that rejects the role of discipline. And this is a very common phenomenon in the North American church, that we reject discipline. We reject the process of church discipline. Matthew 18 is torn out of our Bibles. That is wrong, and that shouldn't be the case. And part of the reason is because we've had these mega churches. And how do you execute Matthew 18 in a mega church setting, especially when you get to the more appellate rounds of Matthew 18? How do you do that in a mega church setting? I don't know. And how many mega churches do that? So Matthew 18, very neglected process. Not if, you confront someone with the sin, a personal sin, not a false teaching. Like, I don't have to confront that pastor over his errant statement about what a church should look like and what is a beautiful looking church. I don't have to Matthew 18 him. That is false teaching. That is public teaching. But if someone sins against me, or I perceive that someone sins against me, then I go through the Matthew 18 process. I confront them. And if they don't listen, then I get more people. And it doesn't mean that those people have to agree with me. It doesn't mean that I'll get what I want. It doesn't mean that I'll get validated. That's the whole purpose of going through the process. I might not be validated, or I might be validated. And, iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. But this is a church that has no interest in sharpening one another. And I listened to earlier parts of this sermon, and it seems to be like, come as you are, but don't stay as you are. But there's no real picture of what not staying as you are really looks like. If you're celebrating the fact that you have transvestites serving in your ministries, you can't really use the come as you are, stay as you are church mantra that we often see thrown about. This is a church that rejects the role of discipline, and that's wrong. But this is not just a thing going on in FBC Orlando. This is going on everywhere in the country. This is a huge problem in the churches. We don't use Matthew 18. You'll hear about people being excommunicated without a Matthew 18 process. You'll hear about that, which FBC Naples, which isn't too terribly far. It's in the same state as FBC Orlando. They had whole cloth excommunications without a real Matthew 18 process because they were labeled racist. But how many churches do you see go through it the right way? And I'm sure some Presbyterians in the audience will be cheering you guys on, but I don't know. I think the Presbyterian Church in America, the PCA to be specific, is too rigid in their ecclesiology that they can't execute church discipline properly. And this was evident in the whole I believe it was Greg Johnson is the name, of the guy who hosted the first ever Revoice conference. I did a video on this. He hosted the Revoice conference at his church, and a few years later he was under a church trial basically over his lack of qualifications, but because he was an ordained elder in a PCA church, the burden of proof required meant that being a side B person does not disqualify you from ministry, which is absurd. The idea of someone being a homosexual means that they're not above reproach, which is one of the basic qualifications for being a pastor or an elder or even a deacon. You got to be above reproach. So this is a very difficult topic. it's a topic that I'd like to have more discussion on as a church, because we need to really hone in on what it means to actually be a church. Church discipline is one of those reasons why church discipline is one of the things that makes a church a church. It's not a homeless ministry. It's not a pregnancy care center. Discipline. That's actually in the Bible. That's not saying you shouldn't do social ministries, but that's not what makes the church the church. There are plenty of charities out there, but the church is special. It's ordained by God with a purpose. So that's what I want to talk about in this video. And FBC Orlando, yeah, they're obviously pretty pro-homosexuality in that. And pro-fornication. Why do I say fornication like it's fortify and fornicate? Pro-fornication, as well as like it's okay to be pro-abortion, which is a pretty squish, effeminate stance. That's another issue in the church, is effeminacy, which I've written about extensively. More on that to come. So anyway, that's all I got to say in this video. My name is Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. If you like this kind of content, also subscribe to the channel and check out evangelicaldarkweb.org. And if you really like this content, go to evangelicaldarkweb.org/join, and you can become a Patreon-like subscriber, because we don't use Patreon because they are not free speech friendly. So let me know what you think about what I think in the comment section below, and I will catch you on the next one.